Hello and welcome to the business edition of PM Express with me, Philip Nanfuri. And today we want to look at the Ghana Commodity Exchange. Yesterday was exactly a year the bell was rung for the first commodity trading on the Ghana Commodity Exchange. And I'm sure many of you are wondering what exactly the Ghana Commodity Exchange is all about. I'll put it in very simple terms, then we'll move on to look at the infographics. Then my guest will give us the proper definitions of what the Ghana Commodity Exchange is all about. But I'll say it's a centralized marketplace where buying and selling of commodities exist. And by commodities, we can split them into agricultural commodities and non-agricultural commodities. So agricultural commodities, we have our maize, we have our soya, we have our sorghum, we have rice, etc. If you look at non-agricultural commodities, and you can talk about oil, you can talk about minerals and other stuff. So I want us to start with the first infograph, and that tells us what exactly the Ghana Commodity Exchange is all about. Right, so that was just a snapshot of what exactly the Ghana Commodity Exchange is all about, and this was information from the Ghana Commodity Exchange website. And I want us to move on to the next part of the infographics that looks at some benefits and positive effects of the Ghana Commodity Exchange on the broader economy of Ghana. Let's take a look at that. Right, so that was the first part of the importance of the Ghana Commodity Exchange. Let's take the next infographic that also tells us something about the Ghana Commodity Exchange. Right, so we looked at the importance of the Ghana Commodity Exchange. I want us to look at the last part of our infograph, and many were asking me today where the Ghana Commodity Exchange sits under. Some were asking me if it's similar to the Ghana Stock Exchange or the Ghana Alternative Exchange, who regulates them and stuff like that. So this is just a small infograph to show us that the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, has oversight responsibility for the Ghana Commodity Exchange, and it functions basically in a similar way as the Ghana Stock Exchange or the Ghana Alternative Exchange will work, but with some minute differences. So this is just a pictorial view of how or where the Ghana Commodity Exchange sits. Let's take a look at that. Right, so that was more or less a framework of where the Ghana Commodity Exchange sits when it comes to trading, and I mean financial instruments trading. With this one, we have commodities, so they come under the Securities and Exchange Commission. And our guest is no other than the CEO of the Ghana Commodity Exchange. His name is Dr. Kadri Alpha. He's going to be walking us through a year on since the Ghana Commodity Exchange came into being, what exactly has transpired, what are the lessons we have learned, what are we going to change as we progress with commodities trading, which is actually novel in Ghana but practiced elsewhere, as he will tell us, from other countries such as Ethiopia, Rwanda, etc. So at this juncture, we'll take a quick break and we'll be right back. Right, thanks for staying with us, and this is the business edition of PM Express with me, Philip Nanfuri. My guest, Dr. Kadri Alpha, he's the CEO of the Ghana Commodity Exchange. Doc, I want to say a very big thank you for joining us here.
Thank you very much for having me in the studio.
Thank you. So yesterday marked exactly 1 year the Commodity Exchange began trading, and for all those who are unfamiliar with what the Commodity Exchange is, just a brief 10, 20, 30 seconds. Can you tell us what exactly the Ghana Commodity Exchange is all about?
So the Ghana Commodity Exchange is a market that links buyers and sellers of commodities. They could be agricultural commodities, or they could be, we call it soft or hard commodities. The most important thing is that they trade under rules.
Okay.
There are set rules that that the exchange has developed, and they have been they've actually been approved by the Securities and Exchange Commission, who are our regulators.
Okay.
So it's just a market, it's just a market that links buyers and sellers of commodities.
So simply, it does bring some formality into the whole issue of buying and selling of agricultural and non-agricultural products.
Yes, it's actually, what it does is structures the trade.
Okay.
So, I mean, that makes it easier and more efficient and transparent.
Okay.
So, it's very different from what we have in, the way we trade commodities. The exchange has come in to bring some improvements to it.
So, instead of you increasing your transaction cost by looking for a buyer for a set quantity of maize, or looking for a buyer for a set quantity of rice, the exchange sort of puts all this into perspective and takes care of all that.
Yes, the exchange actually structures the trade and makes it easier for buyers and sellers to meet and to transact business.
Okay. So November 6th last year, I believe the President of the Republic rang the bell for the first trading. Give us a brief in terms of developments from that point till date. The products, your overall structure, your partners, farmers, brokers, etc. How the market or the exchange has developed over this 1 year period.
Yes, so the whole thing started, to trade, obviously you need market actors. So the first thing is that how do we organize the buyers, the sellers and the buyers.
Okay.
You need to educate them. First, you need to educate them and then let them understand how the exchange works. That's the first thing. The second thing is that what we are trading are actually standardized.
Okay.
So we standardize the products according to the industry norms. So it means that you also have to develop standard. Fortunately, the Ghana Standard Authority has standards for most of the commodities that we trade.
Okay.
Secondly, also from the buyer side, mainly the brokers, and then those who are actually going to be buying.
Okay.
So all the requirement is that the brokers have to be licensed. So we have brokers who are already operating on the Ghana Stock Exchange.
Okay.
And they have transitioned and added commodities to the portfolio product that they are actually buying. And then we also have generally some of the agro, people, those institutions that are buying commodities to process into finished goods also coming in, and then we also had to get them and get them to understand what we're doing. That's the buyer side, and then it was also very important for us to also get the financial institutions. Mm-hmm. You cannot have the kind of business we are doing. There's a lot of financing required for farmers and then for traders. So it's important to also get financial institutions involved, which we did. We had developmental. We can't do it on our own everything on our own. So we had to get a lot of partners.
Yeah.
Some of the partners are from the public sector. The government of Ghana is a very strong partner of the exchange, and through the Ministry of Food and Agriculture and the Ministry of Trade, and you know, and other departments are all part of the exchange, you know, system. And then we also have the developmental partners and the, you know, NGOs and a lot of the public sector as well. Sorry, the private sector. We have important institutions like NAFCO who are also buying from the exchange. We are also working with them in the warehousing. And then we also have other the greater aspects, the Ghana Standard Authority, the Food and Drug Authority, the fire services, the plant protection services, the insurance services. All these institutions are all very important in helping us to deliver our mandates. And then with the DIPs and the winter partners like the USAIDs, the UK AIDS, the IFC, which is also a very important partner with us. So it is a very complex and broad ecosystem.
I can tell from even the number of partners you have.
Yes, to come to help us to do the business.
Okay, I want to.
And then I haven't forgotten the farmers too, who are very key. Okay. Because they are from the supply side. The farmers are very important as well.
Okay, we will drill further into each of the thematic areas we've mentioned. Maybe we'll look at the farmers, we'll look at the other partners and see what we can learn from there. But I want to ask this on the issue of awareness and education on the exchange. You mentioned at the beginning that when you're starting this, your sellers, your buyers need to be educated first. Now, I did a very unscientific survey between yesterday and today because I knew you were coming on, and I was asking people whether they were familiar with the Ghana Commodity Exchange and with the workings of it. I got some responses that were negative in terms of they didn't know what the exchange was about, and some very positive, but they know that it's a new phenomenon, so it's going to take some time for it to build, for it to gain traction. How will you say the level of awareness has been, and how do you plan to prop up level of awareness and education about the Ghana Commodity Exchange, particularly on the main actors of it, because I think they are the ones who drive the activity of it. How do we plan to do that?
Yes, I think we have to look at, let's just go back a bit. I mean, before this exchange was actually established, I mean, I can recall that there were a lot of people drawn from different institutions who went outside. Some of them went to outside and looked at other exchanges, and there was a lot of there was a lot of talk about the exchange, but unfortunately it took a long time for the exchange to be established, so that disconnected a bit. So what we did was that when the exchange was established, we targeted the main people that were targeting. The main beneficiaries of the exchange were the farmers.
Okay.
So we did target the farmers. We targeted the farmer-based organizations who have all registered with the Ministry of Food and Agriculture, and then we educated. We first of all did a needs assessment and looked at what they wanted, and then tried to integrate them into the exchange system and others as well. We have also embarked on a lot of public education. I can say that we haven't actually been able to do as much as we would have wanted to do. But I think it is the responsibility of all of us, including those who are working with exchange directly and indirectly, and our partners, to educate on what exchange does. We also been a bit cautious because the exchange is new. We don't actually have the entire infrastructure that we require to draw in more more farmers or more traders. I went to somewhere and when I was talking about the exchange in one of the one community, and they asked me that, okay, I have maize and where do I take it to? And we didn't have a warehouse at that place.
Okay, in that particular
location. So there was nothing that I could tell them. So we are just being a bit cautious. It is important that everybody knows about what the exchange is doing, but at the same time we have to make sure that we also have the the infrastructure and the services there for people to be able to access it. So we are embarking on we are going on the radio, we're going on the TV. This is part of the strategy to get a lot of people to understand what we're doing. And then I think it is, you see that even, from the policy side, anywhere even the president or, the state ministers go anywhere, they talk about exchange, all this equally very, very good. Okay. So this is all part of the education that we're doing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. You in your submission, you mentioned how you went, if correct me if I'm wrong, you went out for learning experience, if I can say so. You yourself have been part of the Rwandan or the Ethiopian. Which one was it?
Both of them.
Both of them. Fantastic. And these are two African economies that are on the path of progressive growth, if I can call it that. What pertains in those economies that we can draw on for the Ghanaian experience? What lessons can we pick from these two countries particularly, or from your experience working with other exchanges? What can we learn and apply to the Ghana situation?
Yeah, so I mean, to be quite fair, the exchange was modeled on some of these exchanges. Okay. Particularly the Ethiopian, which has been very successful. The Ethiopian exchange actually focused more on export crops. Okay. And that is much easier for them to trade, because we have started with staples like maize, which is consumed everywhere, and getting the market structured and getting the information to those who are actually producing these commodities is it's a lot of work to do. I mean, in Ethiopia, it was just coffee, coffee, sesame, which are already crops that, had a very straightforward distribution channel. So and then what Exchange did was just to structure the trade and then manage the quality and in the trading of those commodities. What we can learn from the, Ethiopian example is that there are some commodities that maybe you can look at how you can, for instance, those commodities has a lot of problems, so, I mean, looking at how you can structure those commodities, I'll give example like coffee, for instance. Coffee is a very important crop in Ethiopia, and I mean, there were a lot of quality issues relating to coffee, and so the government decided to centralize the trade of coffee to the exchange alone. And so what happens is that it's been very successful. I mean, volumes have increased. Revenue, they are now trading in billions of dollars. So we look at some of the value chains like cashew, like for sesame, for instance, which are commodities that are coming up. And then we have a situation where our farmers are not getting the right prices. We have to see how we can structure the trade and support aggregation, maybe logistics and transport. We also have to support, things like provide a platform where they can come in and then discover prices, because that is going to be helping. That is very important in helping them to get better prices, and then they can go and produce more of the crop.
I want us to pick on this point a bit and then see what we can do with the expansion. You said, I think it's the Ethiopian example, they centralized the trade of coffee.
Yes.
Okay. And they are dwelling mainly on export crops. Yeah. We have started with staple crops. And currently you have 4 main crops trading. That will be maize, soybean,
sesame, sorghum.
And sorghum.
Yeah.
Okay. My question here is then, wouldn't it be, I know it may be a policy issue, but from a practitioner's perspective, wouldn't it be prudent if we adopted something similar with our cocoa? Will it be practicable if we had something like that with our cocoa?
I think we have to put that into context. I mean, we've been talking to both the government and then the cocoa board. We had some talks. I mean, some of them have been informal, but at least, we've been talking about it. I think it's just the way that the crops are traded. I mean, coffee is traded very differently from cocoa. I mean, how Ethiopian traded coffee before the exchange was through auctions.
Okay.
So then what they do is that they organize auctions, and then you know, they come and then they trade it. But most of the time, you would have a situation where, you know, sometimes what is actually bought, the auctions are, the crops are usually bought on samples, and you realize that the samples are very different from, you know, from what the main crop is. You know, so somebody comes and he sells his coffee on the sample, and then you go to pick it up and it's very different. Now, we know that cocoa has a very well-established, you know, distribution channel already. So our idea is that we are working, we have to come out with an alternative that is probably going to strengthen the system that is already there. So I cannot prejudge it. Yeah. I think what we need to do is, as an exchange, is to look at some of the way that we can improve what is already there. I mean, we have come in as an exchange. It's an alternative to the system that is already existing. You know, so we've come to complement what is already there. You know, so we have to prove that we have a model that will probably add more value to what is already there. But then, so that's where we are still discussing with the government, and then with the, you know, the relevant people who are involved in it.
Okay, the staples you mentioned, I believe when you were discussing the issue of staples, you said some of them have problems.
Yes.
If you can highlight what you mean by problems for somebody who is not very oriented towards the agricultural.
Well, if you look at maize, for instance, maize has a lot of quality issues. I mean, maize is actually cultivated by smallholder farmers. Okay. The smallholder farmers are just farmers, you know. I mean, they produce, they go in and they sow the seeds, they harvest the crops. The other aspect of what they need to do is actually the quality side, the quality control, and then the marketing side, where they don't have the expertise there. And then there are other aspects too. So we have a very high post-harvest losses, you know, I mean, considerably, you know, high post-harvest losses in some of our food staples. So the point is that how do we reduce these post-harvest losses? Mm-hmm. When I talk about post-harvest losses, I'm talking about material losses as well as market losses, okay, market-related losses as well. So these are the problems that exist, you know, and then the exchange has come in to address.
Okay, I don't know if it will be out of place to ask this question. When you look at the normal stock exchange, they will talk about advances and laggards. So which stocks are leading the market, which stocks are weighing down the market. So for this, I want to find out, amongst the four so far, which ones have a high demand and which ones have a low demand, if I can put it in that way. Which of these crops are seeing more volumes traded and value traded, if I can put it like that?
Yes, I think, I mean, to be quite honest, the exchange is only a year old. Okay. You know, so we started trading maize, and I mean, of course, maize is one of the key staples food that we eat here. And then we added soybeans to. We added soybeans. We listed soybean as a contract, and then we've now got sesame, and then sorghum. I mean, of course, the way maize is consumed in Ghana here, yes, it's got the turnover is very high. I mean, you look at maize, I think we produce about 1.4 million or so, an average of that, and you know, there is a lot of liquidity in maize. I mean, if you look at what exchange trades, I mean, most of the commodities the transactions that we are doing currently is in maize, and because we just started, okay, the other crops have huge potential as well. I mean, for instance, soya has a very big potential, and as well as sesame, and then sorghum. I mean, these crops, soya, sesame, and sorghum, these crops are actually, you know, produced, you know, once a season. But maize is actually produced twice, and so the volume is quite large. The only issue is that the margins for maize are very, very, very small. But you have sorghum, you have soya, sorghum and sesame, which have very high margins. But the exchange is here to solve problems. You know, we're not going to be saying that because maize is a difficult crop. The exchange has been established to solve problems. I mean, there's a lot of problems in the maize value chain, and then we are solving those problems. We are working with farmers, we are working with traders, we are working with agribusinesses, and then we are working with policymakers as well to ensure that at least we optimize, you know, the production and the trading of this of maize, and to make it more efficient, so that our farmers will benefit, you know, so that their hard work will be, you know, will be worthwhile, and then that's what we're doing.
Okay. Apart from these four, as you just clearly stated, the exchange is relatively new. 1 year. We should see activity pick up over the course. Should we see, or would we see, an addition to these four in the coming weeks or months or next year? Are we going to see, one, more agricultural products, and two, a start of non-agricultural products?
Yes, so we are expecting to add rice to the list before the end of the year. Next year we are focusing more on some of the cash crops. Okay. So we're looking at cashew, for instance, palm oil, and then you know, we are also be looking at coffee as well. Okay. I mean, these are very important crops with you know, international appeal, and then we believe that we have to try and then diversify, you know, our portfolio a bit. I mean, we have staple foods, staple crops that we are currently trading, but it's important that we add these cash crops to it. You know, mainly tree crops. We also planning to add a mineral. Okay. Yes, mineral. I mean, if minerals such as you know, gold to our trading. But I mean, I must say that you know, when the exchange was established, a decision was made that we should focus more on staples, and that is what we're doing for now. But in the coming years, we will be looking at adding more products. I mean, I was telling somebody that the exchange even wants to trade animals, and then the one person was asking me, how do you trade animals? But I mean, if you can establish the characteristics of the animal and you can create a contract, then you can trade it. And then other exchanges have done that. I mean, there are, you know, cattle being traded in the exchanges, and pigs and goats, you know. I mean, I gave the person example that cattle, we have the one with the hump and then the one with the flat back. That gives you 2 contracts already, you know, because some people want, you know, based on that characteristic, some people might buy the cattle with the hump, and somebody might buy the cattle with the straight back. So that creates a contract. And then once the contract is created, the market would have the opportunity to buy or sell it.
I just want to quickly add this, or ask this. In the other countries, the Ethiopia, Rwanda example, have they moved from just the export crops to minerals and even to the animals?
Well, Rwanda is still trading. I think 2 main. I think they are still trading the food staples. Ethiopia hasn't actually moved into minerals. I mean, they are still on the export crops. It's mainly coffee, and then they have sesame, and then they have and then they also have sesame. They have chickpeas and other crops. And these are just mainly food crops. Okay, but they are very, you know, Ethiopia is one of the, you know, it's a very very big, you know, coffee producing country, and sesame as well, and these are highly valued commodities. So it is better to focus on commodities that you have some sort of competitive edge to optimize the trading of it, and to have more value, you know, and that is what they're doing. Okay. And then that is something that we can also learn from.
Okay. As we began the discussion, you spoke about standardization, then you spoke about warehousing, and I would assume that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Doc. So if there's a farming cooperative. They come together, they've produced their maize. There's supposed to be a warehouse where their product will sit in, so that if there is a buyer, then all things being equal, when the contract is agreed on, then it moves from there to the point of the buyer's purchase.
Yeah.
With warehousing now, how many did you start with and how many do you have now? And what's the distribution of the warehousing with regards to the Ghana Commodity Exchange?
Okay, so let me just clarify our business model a bit.
Okay.
I mean, so, you know, getting the farmers to aggregate and supporting them with transport and logistics to take the commodities to our warehouses, or points that the commodity can be tested and graded and weighed and then, you know, and rebagged and stored is very important. That is very important to our business. So we have, first of all, when the farmers harvest, the model is that we have smaller warehouses, you know, smaller warehouses, maybe the size of 50 to 100 metric tons, just near to the farm gates. So initially is to encourage the farmers to harvest and put in those warehouses. Now, it could be a group of farmers that are doing that. You know, once they put in those warehouses, we help them, you know, within themselves, we help them to manage the quality, because obviously there's going to be issues with, you know, insect infestation and others. And then once it meets a scalable volume, I mean, our minimum contract size is 1 metric ton.
Okay.
And so then we would help them to actually to evacuate these commodities to bigger warehouses, usually at the districts or at the regional capitals. And that is where, you know, these commodities will be inspected. They'll be inspected, they'll be tested, they'll be graded. You know, I mean, if cleaning and drying is required, we do that as well. And then they are put into the standard bag sizes, 50 kilogram bag sizes, and stored, and then they are given a warehouse receipt. So the warehouse receipt is just evidence of ownership. You know, it defines the quantity and the quality of the, you know, of the commodity that they have produced. And then they can use the warehouse receipt, you know, they can trade it on the exchange platform, or initially they can use the warehouse receipt as a sole collateral to secure a short-term loan from some of our partner banks. We just launched the first electronic warehouse receipt financing in Ghana. That's about, I think, somewhere last week. Okay. So what it means is that now the farmers, when they harvest their crops, they don't need to sell at a distress. You know, even if prices are low, they don't need to sell at a distress, and they need work, they need money. They can bring their commodities to our warehouses, store them, get a warehouse receipt. We get, you know, then they can get, you know, they can get some working capital or money to meet their immediate needs while they wait for prices to be better for them to sell. So that's the services that we're providing, and then essentially once this is done, then it means that they are looking at not, you know, going into a kind of business that would compromise their ability to better their revenue, you know, and that is what exchange usually stands for and want to do.
Okay. This is the business edition of PM Express. My guest, the CEO of the Ghana Commodity Exchange, Dr. Kadri Alpha. My name, Philip Nanfuri. We're taking a quick break. We'll be right back. Right, thanks for your company, and this is the business edition of PM Express, and we've been looking at the operations of the Ghana Commodity Exchange since they launched or they started their first trading somewhere, or exactly November 6, 2018. Yesterday was 1 year. The Ghana Commodity Exchange has been in operation. As you can see, we have their website displayed for you, for us to all familiarize ourselves with it, and the CEO of the Ghana Commodity Exchange, Dr. Kadri Alpha, has been sharing with us the development in there. We've looked at their main actors, from farmers, traders, brokers, and financial institutions. That was the last bit he spoke about, the warehouse receipt system. And now we have the electronic warehouse receipt system where these farmers can use this leverage on it for credit from the financial institutions, etc. You can trade in it because your goods or wares, or let me say your commodities, are sitting in a warehouse under lock and key, and you can use that. We've also looked at the number of crops or commodities, and Doc told us they are starting with staples before we transition into export crops or cash crops. Cashew, etc. will be coming soon before we make a transition into minerals. But this will all be on a gradual basis. So keep your eyes and ears glued to developments in the Ghana Commodity or other Ghana Commodity Exchange. Now, Doc was telling us about the warehouse receipt system. I want to pick something little that I have here, and we'll wrap up that part of our discussion. And it's just, Doc, on the warehouse receipt system, I have something here I just want to read. So, yeah, why the need for the Ghana Commodity Exchange warehouse receipt system? You're talking about the storage. You're talking about commodities being stored in secured warehouses under the control of the Ghana Commodity Exchange. Access to credit. Required collateral are commodity evidenced by the receipt and in custody of the Ghana Commodity Exchange Management under agreement. It facilitates liquidity, access to markets, and can be traded through the GCX platform. This is a question I want to ask just for some education. So if these commodities or crops, staples, let's use our maize, are sitting in a warehouse, and there's all things being equal, something untoward happens, a destruction of the warehouse, etc. What's the framework in there? So what then happens to the receipt that you are holding? What then happens to it? Are these products insured? How does insurance come in? That type of.
Okay, so I mean, we are mandated to ensure that we protect the investment that the farmer has put in the warehouse.
Okay.
Because I mean the crops are for them and it's their investment. So we use a combination of performance guarantees and insurance and indemnities.
Okay.
To mitigate the risk. I mean, you're talking about particularly maybe example a warehouse breaks. All of a sudden there is an earthquake or there's a flood. Yeah. Yes, there is. We have insurance for that. We have standard insurance for. Also, all those warehouses are. The physical structure of the warehouse is insured against natural disasters. And then the content of the warehouse, where the commodities are, there's also an insurance. Now, the warehouse receipt itself is just a document of title, basically. It can be passed on from one owner to the next without actually delivering the commodity. Now, if I have a warehouse receipt and I pass it on to you, it doesn't mean anything unless I have what is called a performance bond. The performance bond actually is a surety against, is a surety that warehouse receipt that has been passed to you is actually supported by a commodity. Okay. And the exchange has a responsibility as a statutory responsibility to ensure that every warehouse receipt is backed by a commodity, and then that commodity will have to be delivered. And then we would have to guarantee the quantity and the quality of that commodity, that is represented by the warehouse receipt. We also have what they call the indemnities against theft and burglary, and then all those ones are all insurance products, a combination of insurance products and then the funds that the exchange has set aside to ensure that we are able to indemnify against any losses. It could be physical losses in terms of quality and in quantity. So if somebody goes in and physically breaks down the warehouse and takes the commodities, then it means that there is a loss situation here, and so the exchange has insurance for that. What is also assuring is that because the banks would finance it, the banks are very, very keen on ensuring that at least all the risk associated with losses are mitigated. Okay. So we have to de-risk. It's important. If we don't de-risk, the banks won't finance it. So we have the operational risk. The operational risk could come from human errors. It could come from equipment failures. It could come from, anything associated with human errors. And so we have to indemnify, and we have controls. We have the Ghana Standard Authority, and then we have the Securities and Exchange Commission, who constantly go to the warehouses to do their own assessment to make sure that, all this, we have good controls in place. The scales have to be, all the scales have to be calibrated. They have to be, every morning they have to be weighed and make sure that everything is fine. The fire services also would go and ensure that there's no any fire hazards there and the commodities are stored safely. The Food and Drug Authority also go to the warehouses, to do their own checks. The plant protection people also go there to do their own checks. So we are under a very huge regulatory, system to ensure that at least these commodities are all safe. There's no losses to investors.
Okay, quick one before I move to my next question. The number of warehouses, I don't think I got that.
Yes, so we currently have warehouses. We have warehouses in Tamale, we have warehouses in Wa, we have warehouses in Kintampo, we have warehouses in the Afram Plain, we have warehouses in the Jura, we have warehouses in Kumasi, we have warehouses in, I've mentioned Kintampo, we have we have warehouses in Sandema. So our warehouses are well spread.
They're well spread.
They are well spread.
And all linked by this electronic system.
Yes. So basically how it works is that once a farmer makes a deposit and then the commodities goes through some testing and standardization, and electronic warehouses is issued to them, automatically we see that on the trading floor. So any buyer, the sellers will go in and go and assess the system there and then put in their sell order. And then the buyers also come in and then put in their buy order. And the system automatically matches the transaction until it's where the price are agreed.
Okay, this is the point I must ask. We've been discussing interest rates since yesterday on the back of the president's comments about high interest rates and how the government should interrogate or look into it. I know banks typically shy away from agriculture in this country, and that's why we have the Gessle, Ghana Interbank Risk. I'm sure you're very familiar with Gessle.
Gessle, yes.
What are you doing with the banks to ensure that if they use their warehouse receipts for lending, their loans are a bit soft in nature, but at the same time, the banks want to also price in their risk factor? How do you guys come to an agreement on the rates for these farmers? Because we don't want a situation where the farmers will take too high rates and then it will affect their business. Is there anything that works to ensure that there's some agreement on a good rate for the farmers?
Yes, I think the most important thing is the reason why the banks, the banks want to lend. I mean, we started talking to 2 banks initially. Now we have 12 banks that we have agreement with. All of them want to support the farmers. They want to provide loans for farmers. The banks are also very particular about risk, because they don't want their investment to just go like that. So what the banks are saying is that, look, if you can assure us that the commodity that is financed is safe, then it means that we can give you a better rate. So that is the discussion that we've been having. We have banks that are even ready to give an interest rate of, 15%, 20%, so you're looking at it, and that is per annum. If you look at a conventional, currently some of the farmers are getting loans at 65%, and then others, through the loan sharks, and
that's high.
That is very, very high. So the banks are they are ready to lend. It's just that they want to ensure that the operational risks and the credit risks are addressed. Gessle is important because you can mitigate credit risks, you can mitigate operational risks, but the market risks aspect is difficult because of the prices are volatile all the time. The prices are volatile, particularly for the food staples. We know that these are seasonal crops, and then demand and supply changes. Usually the prices would go up or down. Now, so what is important for us now is that when there is any losses from market risks, then the Gessle will kick in. The Ghana, incentives,
incentive-based system for risk
sharing,
Okay.
Yes,
London.
in
It's quite a long
London.
one.
Yes. Okay. So Gessle is very important. I think it's a very, very important intervention. It's going to, we are going to be seeing a lot improvement in the way the banks are lending, and in the confidence that the banks are actually engaging and supporting agriculture.
Okay. Doc, we'll be winding down shortly on our conversation, but an important part I glean from the people I engaged is data from the exchange. The relatively new nature suggests that things are still picking up. If someone were to ask for total value or volumes traded to date, what answer would you give them? Because that's one of the things I want to ask you. What is the total volume and the value traded, so that maybe in a week we can say that the Ghana Composite Index, this was the total value traded, this was the volume traded. With the commodity exchange, what are we looking at?
Yes, I mean, from the conversation that I already have with you, in the first stage of a commodity exchange is, first of all, like trying to put the structures together, working to, first of all, getting the market behind you, getting more warehouses.
Okay.
In the first instance, building partnerships, and then trying to list commodities. Let me just add that it takes a very, very intensive research, to be able to research into commodities and get them listed. Okay. We have it takes an average of probably about four months or so to do that, to list a single commodity in the exchange. Okay. So we have started with maize, and we started with soya. Okay. And then I think we're working with getting the farmers and then trying to get them to bring their crops to us. I think we have with farmers alone, on top of my head, I think we got about farmers to deposit about 8,000 metric tons of their maize. Okay. Now, what is important is not about the size of or the volume; it's about the quality. Okay. So if you get farmers who probably would have been producing, crops and then selling it off the farm gate, now these farmers are actually producing. They are certifying, they are grading this maize, they are packaging it to increase the market appeal. Okay. And they are storing it, and they are getting the warehouse to see it, and then they are actually selling the crops at the time that the prices are right for them. It's not the same as just going into, just taking maize and putting it in a warehouse and selling it off. No. Okay. There's a lot of work. There's about value. What is the value addition here? Okay. So you may see this and say 8,000. But then you ask how much work has gone into this. And that is the way forward for our agriculture. That's the way forward our agriculture. The most important thing is how do we optimize what our farmers are producing. And I can even also say that in our when you bring your crops to us, the post-harvest loss is just reduced to 1.5%, which is just adjustment for moisture loss. And if you look at it, that in some crops, you can get post-harvest loss as high as 40–50%. But we don't have those kind of losses. We have been able to reduce post-harvest losses substantially from the market average of between 20 to 30% to just 1.5%. And the 1.5% is just adjustment that we do for moisture. Okay. Moisture. Because, obviously, when you put a bag of corn here after 6 months, it's not the same. The weight is not the same. So, we have to look at how we can work with the farmers to optimize the return that they are getting from their production. Okay.
Look, last and final question, or final question. So, we've done 1 year. There's more to come from the Ghana Commodity Exchange, I'm sure. And in about a minute, situate for us where GCX will be heading. You've shared some with us already, but just sum it up for us. Where we'll be heading in the next year, so that come November 2020, by God's grace, we can say that, okay, so over the course of 2 years, our commodity exchange has been able to revolutionize the agricultural sector, has brought the jobs that the finance minister spoke about at your inauguration, has changed Ghana's economic transformation.
Yes, so let me just talk about jobs. I think you said it that the finance minister talked about jobs creation. Yes, so you look at jobs created in the agricultural commodity trading sector. So you have a lot of jobs that has been created, some of them directly, indirectly, been created in commodity trading, in brokerage services, risk management, clearing and settlement, and then even the warehouses, certification, grading, sampling. Work has been created, and then also look at things like sorting out and other jobs. These are all jobs that were not here, and they've all been created, and that is remarkable. In fact, some of the exchanges, the warehouses are actually regenerated communities. So you have a warehouse there, and then people are working in, and then people come to sell to them, and then people start coming in to do their businesses eventually.
So all good things for the exchange to come.
Yes, but then what I can also say is that currently we have about 320,000 farmers who are working with us, and we've managed to integrate them. A year now, we expect to integrate about 1 million farmers.
Fantastic.
Now, the other thing is that commodities, for instance, we want to see a more diversified portfolio of commodities. So we have food staples. We also have some of the cash crops, particularly some of the crops that that can give this country a high export revenue,
a high boost. Okay, yes. So that's Dr. Kadri Alpha, CEO of the Ghana Commodity Exchange, taking us through 1 year since this Ghana Commodity Exchange was put into place. And my name, Philip Nanfuri. I hope you've been well informed about this, and I wish you a good night.